Good afternoon. Welcome to MC Webinars. Today we're looking at how LMI can help you build a more strategic and targeted employer engagement strategy. So our host is Carla Archibald, who is MZ's Business Development Manager for Further Education. So that'll be great to hear from her. Just remember, if you have any questions during the course of the presentation, don't forget to put them in the box on your control panel, and we'll do our best to get round to answering them at the end of the presentation. So good afternoon, Carla. I'll hand over to you. I hope you are having a good afternoon.
Thanks, Debbie. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to look at how education providers can improve their employer engagement strategy, and mainly through the use of labour market data. So just an overview of the next 30 minutes then, and what we're hoping to cover. So a quick overview of who we are and what we do for anybody who's new to us. And from the kind of attendee list, I know we've got a few new faces, which is always nice. So great that you can join us this afternoon. Some context around why employer engagement is critical to success. Then some of the challenges that education providers are facing at the minute. And then we'll look at the 3 steps that we believe are a great starting point to a more strategic and targeted approach when we're thinking about engaging with employers. So with current policy then and qualification reforms in the FE sector, such as the apprenticeship levy, the T-levels work placement requirement, and the ever-present need for strong employer links, a good employer engagement model is critical. So we understand that because companies don't generally engage with education providers to communicate these skills needs, it usually means you have to trawl through thousands of job postings to try and understand what skills they need. This is a task that's very time consuming and a huge drain on resources. So our mission at MZ then is to help people make better decisions relating to the world of work. And we do this by providing education providers with robust and detailed labour market insight to help them understand where they should be focusing their efforts. And this works across kind of many business units, so anything from curriculum planning, student engagement, or today employer engagement activities. So what's the driver for providers to align provision to local employer needs, and what are the challenges faced in trying to do so? So we all know then about the government's targets for apprenticeships and the introduction of the mandatory work placement or industry placement, as it's been called, within the new T-levels qualification. We know that colleges will need to grow their existing employer engagement activities to allow learners to succeed and also meet government targets. So we know from that T-levels work placement, for example, if there's no work placement, the learners don't get a qualification. To do this well, providers will have to identify and prioritise the best local opportunities. But we often struggle to do this with small teams and limited and ever shrinking resources that you currently have access to. So what does success look like, and what does it mean for providers if they get this right? So your offer will meet local employer needs and contribute to skills shortages, both locally and nationally. Your curriculum will serve the need of your learners by allowing them to achieve their career vision and progress into meaningful employment, which at the end of the day is why education providers exist. And you'll also have a strong case to present to Ofsted for meeting learner and employer needs, as well as contributing to government targets and preparing effectively for upcoming qualification reforms. Lastly, all this contributes to maximised funding potential for the education provider. So we've looked at the context and drivers around the need to improve our employer engagement strategy, but what information do we actually need to know in order to be able to identify local growth opportunities and then shape curriculum accordingly. It's not just about being able to kind of effectively engage with employers, but it's then what we do with that information from that. So we need to understand regional growth industries and the occupations that make up these industries. We need to be able to identify the skills required in these growth occupations and analyse local job postings to dig deeper and get key information around that. We need to connect this intelligence back to existing provision and then adapt and develop our offer accordingly. And with all that, we can then use this aligned offer to confidently engage with employers to meet their skills needs. So before we look at the 3 steps in more detail, I think it's worth just spending a couple of minutes on the difference between occupations and industries, as this forms a lot of what we'll talk about over the next 15-20 minutes. And also the importance of 1-digit versus 4-digit SIC and SOC codes. So just a really basic kind of LMI lesson over the next couple of slides. So an industry is a group of businesses that produce similar goods and services, and which all share similar production processes for those goods and services that they sell. Industries are classified by what we call SIC codes, which means Standard Industry Classification Code. An occupation, is a job or a profession. So lots of different jobs make up each industry, and they're defined by SOC codes or Standard Classification Occupation Codes. So if we kind of think of an example of that, an industry might be the hospital activities industry, and then a job might be a nurse or a nursing assistant that fits within that industry. So MZ data is unique in that instead of giving broad headline data at kind of 1-2-digit SIC or SOC code level, we have the ability to dig down to 4-digit, which is the most granular detailed level of occupation and industry data. So SIC and SOC codes at 1 or 2-digit are not particularly helpful in helping us understand specific growth areas within a region, which in turn means it's harder to understand local employer skills needs. At 1-digit SOC, for example, if we look at the left-hand side column, we would get a broad overview of skilled trades occupations, which could be anything from carpentry to bricklaying or plumbing. At 4-digit though, we would be able to identify specifically which trades were growing locally, such as bricklayers and masons. On the other hand, so if we look at industry detail, at 1-digit SIC, we would be able to have a broad overview of the manufacturing industry, whereas at 4-digit, we could unpick each sub-industry in much more detail. So that could be anything from processing and preserving of meat or the manufacturing of leather goods. So 2 very different sub-industries, and that gives us an idea of kind of how helpful SIC and SOC codes are at that top end 1 and 2-digit. So the 3 steps then, what are they? So we have a how-to guide, so this will be circulated after the webinar along with the recording, but we've basically kind of put together a how-to guide on how to effectively engage with employers and improve your employer engagement strategy, which comes in 3 broad points. So in order to successfully engage and build relationships with employers, we believe that providers need to be able to do these 3 things well. So first, they need to be able to identify industry needs within the region they serve and prioritise these growth areas. They need to understand the occupational makeup of these growing industries and understand who they employ. So what types of occupations fit within that industry, as we just looked at on the previous slide. And then we believe that they then need to use this knowledge alongside job postings data to engage with local employers and provide them with the learners who have the right skills and knowledge. So identifying industry needs, understanding the occupations that they employ, then target engage the right employers to be able to give them the right skill set of learner to meet their skills needs. So step one is simply about identifying industry needs within your region. So the biggest challenge for providers that we've kind of identified is often just knowing which businesses to target. And this often results in a bit of a scattergun approach or phone book approach for many of our customers. So what we want to do is be able to have a look at how we can make this a more practical, targeted approach. Knowing which employers in your region would be more likely to respond is a really good place to start. So generally, the businesses that are currently growing are expected to grow, and the ones most likely to engage with a provider about apprenticeships or work placement conversations. So we've used Analyst on this slide to pick out the top 10 industries which will see the biggest growth between 2017 to 2022, and we've chosen the Enterprise M3 LEP region. So that's just for example's sake. We obviously are able to kind of slice and dice all geographies across the UK. So this gives us a good starting point in knowing which businesses are set to see growth and are most likely to be open to conversations. And what we can see in this top 10 is a really good mix of industries there at 4-digit zip code. So we've got everything from business activities that's seen a 10% increase over that time period to restaurant and mobile food services, and also warehouse and storage. So a really good mix of industries that's kind of reflected or already reflected within your course offering. Once we've established the region's growth industries, we then want to be able to unpick these to see what occupations they employ. So that brings us on to step 2. Labour market data can help us to understand the occupational makeup of an industry, which is much more helpful to us in understanding the skills needs of the businesses within those industries. So knowing that the construction industry is growing is fine, but not really helpful in knowing what businesses to target and also what occupations sit within that industry. I think a key point as well that's often overlooked in understanding an industry makeup is that almost every industry is made up of a whole number of occupations that are vital to the sector. So if we think about that hospital activities industry that we looked at in the previous example and the occupations that fit within that, that doesn't just mean it's an industry full of nurses or doctors. You'll also have receptionists, you'll have nursing assistants, you'll have admin staff, payroll staff, etc. On this slide, another example, this table looks at the top 10 sectors in the construction industry as a whole, so that 1-digit SIC, again in the Enterprise M3 region by projected occupation growth from 17 to 2022. And what we can see within that industry is a whole range of sub-industries, all of which are growing at a different rate. So while there's a healthy growth across the construction sector as a whole in this region, if we look at the top end of that graph, it's actually construction of residential and non-residential buildings that's seeing the biggest growth, and that's followed closely by development of building projects. So again, gives us a completely different picture to just knowing that construction's growing in this region at 20% across the entire sector. Paint and glazing is a completely different sub-industry to construction of residential and non-residential buildings. So it's helpful to know top growth industries at 4-digit, but as we've explained, step 2 is all about understanding what occupations sit within that sector. So if we take that top growth sub-industry, which was construction of residential and non-residential buildings, we can then run what's called a staffing pattern to see what occupations are causing that growth. So the graphic on this slide shows us the top 10 occupations employed in the construction of residential and non-residential buildings in the Enterprise M3 region. And we're just looking at 2017 year here rather than that growth. I think what's most interesting is that many of the highest employing occupations are not those that we might automatically associate with this construction industry. For example, if we pick out a couple of these occupations, this industry employs over 400 administration occupations, this one here, and it also employs more than 300 bookkeepers and payroll managers across the region. I think it's also interesting to see some of the occupations in the top 10 that might surprise us. So we can see that production managers and directors in construction is the highest employed occupation, and that's making up almost 11% of the sector in 2017. Whereas if we look at occupations such as bricklayers and electricians, which is this one here and here, we're actually only seeing those occupations make up 3% and 2.6% of the employment in this industry. So I think in terms of employer engagement, the importance of this data at regional level really can't be undervalued. By identifying growth industries, we're able to narrow down to the sorts of employers that are most likely to respond. But having this type of intelligence allows us to understand which occupations they employ. And we can go into a conversation with an employer being much more prepared in this sense. We know exactly who they employ, what their growth areas might be. So looking at these occupations and thinking, well, it's the higher level skilled jobs that they're looking at, or it's kind of the payroll and the admin type jobs that we're looking at, that's their growth areas. And you're just a lot more prepared in your organisation to be able to show and respond with an offer that meets their requirements, rather than going into a conversation blindly. So we've identified growth industries that kind of education providers can target, and we've looked at what occupations they employ. So the final step is the kind of practical application of finding out who the employers are locally and what skills they require in those roles. So within Analyst, we've got a number of functions that make this job really easy, much easier than Google searches and hours spent trolling through job sites. So using the same region and industry as before, so construction of residential and non-residential buildings in the Enterprise M3 LEP, we can look at the business size makeup of all local companies in this industry. So if we look at this top column here. So our data shows then that in 2017, there were 1,967 businesses in this region within the industry of construction of residential and non-residential buildings. If we break this down further, we can identify the size of these businesses by the number of people they employ. So this table shows the breakdown of small to large businesses in the area, and typically what we see kind of across this area is that the majority of them are small businesses, and there's kind of very little in the way of those large businesses at the top end. It's also really helpful to know where these businesses are situated within the region. We've chosen quite a large region there, the Enterprise M3 LEP region. You might also be looking across 2 LEP regions or kind of a government office region. So the bottom graphic shows the top 5 locations in this region, and we've broken it down to local authority level. So there's 5 local authorities that sit within that larger region, and we're able to see kind of total number of establishments in 2017 in those areas. So in terms of how these businesses are spread locally across the region, it's fairly equal in this case. They're all kind of in the top 190s, 180s. And what we've also got on there is the job change from 2017 to 2022, which will give you an idea of growth and how those businesses might look to expand over the next kind of 5 years. So knowing business size is helpful and location is helpful. in informing employer engagement strategies, and it starts to shape some of that thinking and kind of plans of action. But we can go one step further with our job postings tool, and this starts to give us an idea of who is actually hiring and where and what skills they're looking for. So earlier on, we established that the biggest employing occupation of that construction of residential and non-residential buildings industry was the production managers. So we've used that knowledge to pull out the top 10 companies who have posted for this position within the last 12 months. So this is this table here. So we've got a list of the companies and how many unique job postings they've seen from June 2017 to June 2018. So unique just means we've got rid of all duplicates. You'll know yourself that the job market is kind of complex in that it's not just direct employers that post for advertisements or job postings, it's also recruitment agencies. So job posting analytics is really, really helpful in that it gives us information on job posting intensity, as well as top posting companies, the job titles, kind of key skills, all of which is extremely useful for identifying who's hiring for what in your region. So it's just, again, adding another string to your bow and opening those conversations. You know exactly how many job vacancies they've had for a production manager or a plumber in the last 12 months. And this is actually updated monthly. So you'd get access to a whole new month's worth of data every month. So what's equally useful then is this bottom section, being able to understand not just what jobs companies are looking to fill, but what skills these positions require. So that bottom table shows the top 10 skills that employers in the region are asking for. So we've got construction, management, first aid, so a lot of health and safety qualifications are needed within that, recruitment, operations, construction. And I think when we start to look at occupations such as web developers and the more technical, practical occupations, this really, really comes in kind of really, really valuable use. So picking out things like JavaScript and Android and iOS specific skills to a web developer only kind of strengthens your conversations, but also your content. So just knowing skills, knowing hard skills and what kind of employers are looking for not only shapes curriculum content, it can help learners prepare for employment, and it can also inform new curriculum development and prepare providers fully for conversations with employers. So it brings us to the summary then and the end of today's webinar. So a more strategic, focused approach to employer engagement can help your organisation to target local employers who are most likely to engage, as these are the industries that are growing. So using labour market data, I hope we've showed you how you can identify what the occupational needs of those growing organisations are. So you can align and develop your offer accordingly to meet local skills needs. And we also looked at job postings. So we've shown how job postings data can help providers identify key information about employers, such as size, location, the positions they need to fill, and what skills they need in employees. So by following the steps outlined in this webinar, providers can truly understand local employer needs and fulfill their overall mission of 1, giving students the best employment opportunities on completing their education, and 2, supplying employers with the skilled workforce they need. So all in all then, this contributes to the success of local businesses and helps the local economy thrive. So a great opportunity to not only build stronger relationships with employers, but to promote the college to key stakeholders within your community. So that's all from me. We'd love to hear about the issues you are grappling with in terms of not only employer engagement, but anything else that we talked about. So curriculum planning, student engagement, recruitment, marketing, etc. My details are on the screen, but do drop me a line after the webinar. You will get a recording of today's session with the slides, and we'll also be following up personally with that 3-step how-to guide, which unpicks what we've talked about in a little bit more detail today. So thanks for listening. And Debbie, do we have any questions?
Just having a quick look. No, it doesn't look like we have any questions. You must have done a really good job today, Carla. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if anyone has anything that they think about afterwards, or on looking through the recording or the slides afterwards, my email address and my phone number on the screen, so do give me a call and I'll be happy to chat in more detail.
Okay, we also have all the past webinars on our website if anyone's interested, covering a range of different topics related to the further education sector. But there also is a YouTube channel that EMSI has, and we do put all our webinars, free webinars, all on there. So check that out as well. That's EMSI UK. Okay, so thank you very much, Carla. And hopefully we'll be, or you'll be in touch with us, or you'd like to chat with us, just give us a shout. And thank you for joining us. So goodbye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.